This video is brought to you today by the Great Courses Plus, an in-depth online learning platform that lets you access courses taught by top academics and even institutions like National Geographic and the Smithsonian. You can learn at your own pace with no schedules or testing, yet gain every bit of the knowledge you'd get from a university course. More on that later. So for a free trial, head over to the Great Courses Plus at www.thegreatcoursesplus.com/event horizon. With SpaceX's recent successful Starhopper test in Boca Chica, Texas, Elon Musk and the company have moved one step closer towards the reality of sending a crew to Mars. Starship, SpaceX's fully reusable launch vehicle, will have 6 Raptor engines, at least in the current design, and numerous other points of potential failure, which will require many more hurdles and tests. All of which, if successful, will open up an entirely new way to use space surrounding our very own planet and solar system. This includes Starlink, a constellation of low Earth orbit satellites that could, in theory, provide global broadband internet to not only underdeveloped nations, but be a test run of something that could be used around Mars for a future colony to have its own ready-made global network. So, what will the next decade bring us from this company? My guest today covers that and more on his YouTube channel and website, Universe Today.
Welcome to Event Horizon with John Michael Gaudier. In today's episode, John is joined by Fraser Cain, creator and publisher of Universe Today, one of the world's largest portals of space and astronomy news, with over 140,000 subscribers. In 2006, Fraser joined with Dr. Pamela Gay to create Astronomy Cast, which is among the top-rated and most popular podcasts in the natural sciences.
Welcome, everyone, to Event Horizon with me, John Michael Gaudier. If you enjoy what you hear, fall into the Event Horizon, hit the like button, and become an active subscriber by ringing the bell. Fraser Cain, welcome back to the program.
Happy to be here.
Fraser, it's been, about a month or two since we last talked?
Yeah, in person.
In person, yes.
Which was delightful, yeah.
It was fun. That was actually a highlight of my summer, was sitting out there in Joshua Tree.
Looking through telescopes, seeing the night sky.
Yeah, the one that got me was the 20-inch telescope. The 20-inch Dobsonian was astounding.
I always am so disappointed when you look through a telescope at like some deep sky object that you're quite familiar with, like, oh, this nebula or that galaxy. And yet with a telescope that big, you look through them and boom, you're seeing astrophotos with your own eyeballs.
Yeah, color. Yeah. You're seeing color other than, you're seeing just greens and things that you don't see in an 8-inch telescope for sure.
Yeah, and so when I ever tell people, you're going to look through a telescope, you're not going to see what you're expecting. With the 20-inch telescope, you absolutely we'll see what you're expecting.
You see spiral structure and galaxies and things like that.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I'll take 2, please. Yeah, binoculars.
The unfortunate thing is now I want one. So
yeah, I know.
I've been shopping around for 16-inch telescopes lately. So I'm like, man,
Aperture fever. Yeah.
Yeah, aperture fever. And anyway, so what's been going on? What is the story in science news lately that's exciting you the most?
Wow. It has been crazy, actually, this summer. There's too many. I would say...
Very much so.
I mean, there's been some really exciting things that just dropped, like, literally today. But I would say the big story over the summer has been the steps that SpaceX is taking with the Starhopper prototype. Their sort of scaled-down version of the Starship, which is going to be this amazing 2-stage, fully reusable rocket that's going to be capable of lifting, the Empire State Building or something right into space. And we saw them make some really significant, serious steps forward with the Starhopper. And who knew a tower could fly?
It was amazing, that test, watching, both tests, and watching Starhopper just sort of hover out there with that.
Yeah.
And I think what fascinates me most is we're looking at a sort of interesting type of rocket here. This is a methane, driven rocket, and you see this really clear mock diamonds coming out of that thing.
Yep.
And I was very excited. But I think what astonished me most is Elon talking about Starship 2.0 being a much bigger version.
Well, there's the right. So, I mean, the great thing about this is that they've got the two facilities, got the one at Boca Chica in Texas, they got the other one in Florida, and the two teams are kind of competing with each other on who can build a better next version of the prototype, one that's going to be closer to the full scale with multiple Raptor engines capable of flying to multiple kilometers of altitude. It's a pretty innovative idea, and these things are coming together fast. I've seen some pictures of what this thing is going to look like. It's pretty amazing how much this is starting to look like the real Starship. They're putting it together almost with slices. And so we should actually see this. And then, of course, just in an offhand comment, Elon Musk mentions that, in fact, the next plan is to build an 18-meter diameter version of the Starship, something that would then be twice as tall, twice as wide, just a whole other level of complexity. And of course, that sent us all in the space news world scrambling to figure out the details, because you get a offhanded tweet from Elon and there's no details, so we have to fill in the pieces. What would it be possible? What would that look like? How many engines? I think someone did the math. It would require 135 Raptor engines to take off.
135 Raptor engines.
Yeah, to fly.
That's amazing.
So, yes, please. I will absolutely take a rocket capable of lofting several times the weight of the Starship, which is significantly bigger than any rocket that's ever been built before. So,
well, you got to wonder what.
Yeah, we're in uncharted territory.
You got to wonder with that kind of power. I mean, and it probably will drop launch costs even more, because that's what sort of up and heavy and that trend is.
Well, yeah, it's funny. We actually were just talking about this on the weekly Space Hangout. How SpaceX is now, because they reuse these rockets and they're so ready to go, that they're actually now getting ahead of the payloads.
Right.
And so the payloads aren't ready in time, and the rockets are just sitting and waiting. And with a rocket that big, you could just take the entire manifest of every spaceship that's planned for the next year, put them all in one, just have it go up, and then SpaceX would be like, what else can we launch for you? But of course, I don't know if you heard, SpaceX said that they're going to launch 24 Starlink launches. Now, each one of those is going to consist of 60 Starlink satellites. They're going to launch 1,200-ish Starlinks next year. And of course, 24 launches of any rocket will be dramatically more than any rocket company has ever done. And this is just going to be their own satellites to provide a worldwide constellation of high-speed internet. So
I know that that's kind of a dicey topic. Where do you come out on that one?
So I come at it from the objective of providing human beings with high-speed internet where they live on the globe. So right now there are 4 million cell phone towers. And when you look at these 5G networks, they're actually going to have smaller towers, and there are going to be more of them. So let's say for us to, and right now about half of the world has access to the internet. And so to provide internet access to the other half of the world, you're going to need to build at least another 4 million cell phone towers. You're going to have to dig cables across the planet. You're going to have to lay undersea cables through all kinds of sensitive marine environments. It will cause dramatic damage to the environment.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting point, because it would. Yeah,
it
does.
Yeah, it would. And so I think I get, and especially as an amateur astronomer who wants to be able to look through a 20-inch telescope and not see streaks of light passing through my telescope every few seconds. I get that we don't want to have the night sky clouded up by these satellites. And, the Starlinks at this point, it looks like they're not going to be visible to the unaided eye. So you're going to go outside and you're going to look up, and you're not going to see them unless you're in really perfect conditions and it's fairly recent after they were launched. But they're absolutely going to be going through the eyepiece of the professional astronomers, and their life is going to be made substantially worse. So that's the price we pay. And so the question then is that if there is now a mechanism for providing high-speed internet to the underserved in the world, it's a price I'm willing to pay. It's a price I'm willing to pay. I know a lot of other people deeply disagree with me, and I've gotten into all kinds of arguments with this. But like, then what? What is your alternative, right? Do you think that these people should not be allowed to access the internet? Right? That there's the haves and the have-nots, and if you already got your internet, if we can have an argument on the internet about who's allowed to access the internet, it seems a little exclusionary to then say, but all those other people, they don't get to go on my internet, just me and my 4 billion friends.
I have to come out and say I agree with you. I think that the benefits of it outweighs the cost.
Yeah.
And pretty dramatically, actually. And that there was no way we were ever going to avoid not having huge satellite constellations.
Yeah.
No matter what, it was going to happen.
And so if you get to this place where 7 billion people can access the internet, and now suddenly all of these people in various developing nations who can now access global markets, sell their goods, buy things at discounts, be able to collect together, to be able to communicate issues that they face, be able to deal with, children can educate themselves from anywhere on the globe. I mean, it is a tremendous, tremendous good. And if the price that we have to pay is that it makes it a little harder for us to get science done, it's got to be worth it, right?
It's also worth mentioning too that the SpaceX constellation is not permanent. Those things are easily deorbited, so you could drop the whole thing if you really wanted to.
Oh yeah, yeah. They will deorbit within just a couple of years on their own if they're not constantly thrusting themselves. So yeah, absolutely. If we find that in fact it's not worth it. And this is, of course, going back to that assumption that this is going to provide internet to the rest of the world at an affordable price. So if Elon Musk goes back on that and it's only available to the rich on their yachts, then forget it, right? Then he has...
But then the model wouldn't work anyway. I mean, you have to have a lot of people subscribe to it.
The thinking actually is that these things, because they're transmitting through space, the speed of communication is going to be faster, right? Now it's the speed of light as opposed to traveling through a fiber optic cable, which is like about 75% the speed of light. So it'll actually be incredibly valuable to, say, discount trading brokerages, people who are so in fact it'll be useful both to all of humanity, but also especially banks. So unfortunately, there's a real risk that the rich are just going to get richer on it too. So I made Elon Musk, if you go back, I made him publicly say that the goal here is to provide access to all of humanity.
Yes, I saw that on Twitter.
Right. And so if he goes back on this, then we just get to drag this tweet forward and go, Elon, you promised us that this was for humanity, not for rich bankers.
Oh, I think I'm not 100% on board with him on everything, but in this case, I think he'll probably do the right thing and make it available. I mean... I hope so.
I
think he actually has a genuine interest in improving the human condition in the ways that he can. So,
and if it's not his 12,000 satellites, then it'll be Jeff Bezos and his 12,000 satellites.
18,000. I bet he would outdo him.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, of course.
And an O'Neill cylinder and all sorts of things
exactly.
up there.
So that's definitely on my radar.
Now, one other thing about SpaceX, though, before we move on, there's also the idea of using Starship as an intercontinental transport system for people and goods, and anywhere in the world in a half hour, essentially, or under an hour.
No, thank you.
You're not going to be taking a flight on that anytime soon?
No, sir. I will not be flying. I mean, I'm sure at some point when it's totally safe and Elon's grandma uses it regularly, but no, flying at 10,000+ kilometers per hour on a hyperbolic orbit, entering the Earth's atmosphere on a what is essentially a bomb, passing through the atmosphere. No, I think I will take the train. I will drive.
With something that's basically a controlled brick falling through the atmosphere with no real surfaces to fly or do anything.
No, it sounds terrifying.
At the same time, though, 100 years ago, there were people saying that about airplanes. So
yeah, but like for me, hopping on an airplane and taking 12 hours to go to Australia or 15 hours to go to Australia, it's just a wonder of modern science compared to the 3 hours that it could take going on the Starship. But who knows? I may be convinced and come around to the idea.
Well, imagine how long it took in, say, 1850 to go from North America to Australia on a boat. Imagine how long that took.
Sure, yeah, months.
And now we have it down to 12 hours. That's pretty astonishing.
Yeah, so that's fine. I'm good with that. I'm good with 12 hours at, a perfectly safe 1,000 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, as long as I can sleep, I'm okay with it. If I can't sleep, then it's boring, but what can I say?
Yeah.
And we'll be back in a moment with Fraser Cain. Recently, I interviewed Dr. Sean Carroll on this program on the subject of quantum mechanics, a very in-depth topic indeed that we only just scratched the surface on. But over at the Great Courses Plus, Dr. Carroll has an extensive series of courses on that subject, and others, including in-depth multiple lecture discussions of the Higgs boson, dark matter and dark energy, and the physics of time, which is a 24-installment series of lectures that looks at time's unique role in physics, from the arrow of time, or why it only goes in one direction, time's role in quantum mechanics, can it be reversed, and even entropy and Boltzmann brains. In addition to science courses, the Great Courses Plus also offers extensive selections including health and fitness, cooking, philosophy, finance, language, and many, many more, including another subject that's very close to me. It's history, and if I wasn't doing science channels, I'd be doing history channels. And they have some wonderful material on there, ranging from ancient to modern history, spanning across the world, all taught by top educators in their fields. As I said in the beginning, it's university-level education, but done at your own pace, with no tests or reports, only pure learning. And best of all, it's very easy to navigate and access, whether you're on your computer, phone, or tablet, with the Great Courses app with over 10,000 lectures available to choose from. Learn at your own pace, when and where you want to. And here's the best part. You can try it for free by going to www.thegreatcoursesplus.com/event horizon, or click on the link in the description below to start your free trial. Check out the Great Courses Plus today. Fraser, welcome back to the program. So Fraser, let's talk about the moon. We have things going on there as well.
Yeah, everyone knows the moon is my enemy. Purely as an amateur astronomer, someone who's trying to go out and observe the sky in half of the month, the moon dominates and you have no choice but to look at the moon. So
yes, the moon is...
Yeah, by all means, let's talk about the moon.
So we're casting a pall on the moon. We don't like the moon.
Yeah.
Unless you actually want to look at it through a telescope, because that's always interesting, but it never really changes much.
No.
And if you look at it through a 20-inch telescope, I would imagine that's probably going to damage your retinas.
It's like a laser beam.
Laser beam, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, India has tried to land and didn't work. What happened? Do they know?
Well, I don't think we know what happened exactly. So India, of course, with the Chandrayaan-2 mission, they had, they were one-upping themselves. Their first mission was really the mission that helped discover that there was water on the moon in the first place, down in the permanently shadowed ice caps at the southern pole of the moon. And so India was coming back with round 2, and this time they were going to send an orbiter to the moon, and they were also going to drop a lander down, and the lander had a rover on board, and so the lander was going to land at the south pole of the moon, and then the rover was going to deploy, and for one lunar day, for 14 days, it was going to crawl around on the surface of the moon until it went into shadow and got too cold, and everything died. And so just a couple of days ago from when we're recording this, India did a live broadcast as they attempted to put their lander down on the surface of the moon. And in sort of very similar to Israel's attempt to land a spacecraft on the moon, everything looked good for a while, and then the numbers, the velocities, the trajectories started to go in the wrong directions, and then everybody got quiet for a little while, and there was no real solid information, and at that point India lost contact with the lander, and the thinking now is it's crashed. and they think they've spotted the wreckage on the surface of the moon. They're still trying to communicate with it, which would be incredible. It would mean that, landings on the moon are a lot easier than anyone ever thought. All you got to do is just smash something into the moon. But it looks like they've lost it. And this is par for the course. I mean, the Soviets sent many landers at the moon, lost a bunch. They've sent many landers at Mars, lost a bunch. Israel, of course, and
don't forget Beagle.
And Beagle on Mars, yeah. And then everything that tried to get in through Venus. So now we've got, the Soviets have landed on the moon, the Americans, and most recently, of course, the Chinese with their Chang'e 4 mission,
which seems to have been quite the success, actually.
Yeah, apparently they've discovered some kind of goo on the moon, some gel, but we don't know what it is yet.
What are you favoring? I'm wondering if it's just sort of like so much lunar gardening has happened that a little bit of melt happens and you get this sort of a crust going, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I mean, when you say lunar gardening, you're talking about like just micrometeorites churning up. Yeah, you get these situations where a chunk of, like, you'll have an asteroid get hit on the moon, and then another asteroid will hit that site and churn up the material, and then another one will hit that and churn up the material, and they get turned into glass again and merged together and then broken up. And so, until the rover actually tastes it with its tongue and pokes at it with a prod to know if it really is some kind of gel, I would assume it's some kind of glassy substance made in one of these impacts.
If you think about it, just go out during a meteor shower like the Perseids or something like that, and just imagine that happening for billions of years to a surface that doesn't really, have anything else going on. And it's easy to imagine that glass might form from that sort of heat. So that's kind of what I'm favoring.
Well, they discovered a rock that probably came from Earth, right? An asteroid had smashed into the Earth, dug out a chunk of the Earth early on in its history. It flew out into space, hit the moon, and then another chunk hit the moon, dug it down deep under the surface of the moon, and then others dug it back up, broke it apart, mashed it with other things, and then the Apollo astronauts brought it home. So yeah, all kinds of shenanigans have been happening on the moon for a long period of time.
That's actually an interesting idea, because with stuff getting blasted off of Earth early in its history, our geologic record only goes back so far.
Yeah.
So we might conceivably find rocks from Earth very early on that we just don't have here.
There was a piece of research that I saw. Someone was saying that we could actually probably find DNA from ancient Earth life on the moon, preserved on the moon.
Now that brings up another question with the Israeli effort, which was a private effort, as I recall. They sent they covered everything in tardigrades.
Yes, as one does.
Brings up the question is, I mean, Earth life, people freaked out about it, but Earth life has to be contaminating the moon.
Right.
I mean, it's got to be bombarded by this stuff, and it's everywhere, and it's probably not going to survive anywhere up there.
No, there was my favorite, right. So the Israeli lander had some tardigrades on it, and based on, the water bears, these indestructible little animals that can handle vacuum and freezing temperatures and radiation, and they just laugh it off, or they go into hibernation and they wait. And you think about this, my favorite title for a story that was written about this was, yes, tardigrades are probably survived on the moon, but they're not happy about it, which is like it is not their ideal environment being on the surface of the moon.
No, and we know from space that, they can survive it, but they can't exactly reproduce up there or
they're not thriving.
They have no normal life.
They're not dead yet.
They're not dead yet.
Dead eventually.
That said, there are bacteria out there that maybe could.
I don't know about the moon. I mean, they could go into some kind of hibernation state, but I don't know whether they could actually replicate without, in vacuum and cold and such, right?
Well, I don't know if they, outside of an atmosphere, I don't know if they could either, but they can survive the radiation. There's one.
Well, yeah, there was an interesting experiment that was done on the International Space Station. It just wrapped up, actually, where it was a German experiment. They put these little soil samples with various extreme life forms that come from Earth, different kinds of lichen and mosses and cyanobacteria and things like that. And they put them into these little capsules, and then they put them outside on the space station, and then they opened them up. And so they had some Earth dirt and they had some Martian regolith simulant. And then they left them just open to the vacuum of space for the better part of a year. So they had radiation and cold and all of that. And then they closed them up and then simulated the surface of Earth and the surface of Mars to see what would happen. And what they found was many of the creatures were perfectly happy, and they got cranked back up again on the surface of Earth. But more amazingly, some of them, especially the cyanobacteria, were able to get going again on the surface of Mars. So they spent years exposed to the vacuum of space and then began to thrive in the simulated environment of Mars.
That has great implications on things like panspermia.
It really does, yeah. So it shows that we have life forms here on Earth that are they're ready to go. Like, send us in, Chief. We'll terraform Mars.
Now, living on other worlds, are you aware of any research SpaceX might be doing on just how do you live in a Mars colony? Are they doing any research on that, or are they just saying we're going to provide the transport?
Yeah. I really think, SpaceX at this point has just been like, we will take spaceships to Mars. What happens to you on Mars is your problem, not ours. And of course, the reality is that we still have no idea what are the long-term implications of 15% gravity on the moon, 35% gravity on Mars. Is it, we know that microgravity is very hard on the human body for long periods of time. We have no idea what's going to happen to a person who is on, can you gestate a human fetus? Can you bring them to term? Will there be birth defects? We don't know. And then really, until we have anyone's at any kind of experiment, it is bordering on a crime against humanity to have people go to Mars without knowing the answer to some of those questions.
Yeah, and it seems to me, like, for example, to get into ethics, the first human born on Mars, it's a gamble no matter what.
Yeah.
And, what right do we have to have someone born off-world without knowing what would happen?
Yeah.
And those are things we're going to have to face, because it certainly looks like this Mars colony thing is going to happen in some form or another.
Yeah, and it feels like we could get close to some of these answers, right? You set up a base on the moon, you have some astronauts live on the moon for a few years, you'll get a sense right away of whether living on the moon is dramatically different than living, say, in orbit around Earth. So that'll tell us that 15% gravity, and if 15% gravity is fine, and they've taken a bunch of, rabbits and mice and various rats and various animals with them, and they're doing fine, then it raises the possibility that Mars is going to be even more fine. And if there's serious medical complications, then you know that more testing is required before anyone tries to live on Mars for any long period of time. And so, if they're going to just fly hundreds of people at a time on one-way trips to Mars, those people are going to make more people. It's kind of what people do.
Right.
And until that's been figured out, you think about some of the birth defect controversies that have happened here on Earth. What if you've got these people stuck on Mars and they know 100% of the time their children are not viable? That's awful. So more research is necessary, and that means, I hate to be the guy suggesting that we put on the brakes a little bit. So instead, I want to be the guy who wants to encourage us to send centrifuges to space where people can test out different levels of artificial gravity. O'Neill cylinders, baby, right? Let's have some centrifuges people can spin up, see if we can deal with some of the problems of microgravity. Let's send animals and see what happens. And we've got a lot more learning to do.
So that brings up another question. Bezos and the O'Neill cylinders, right?
Yeah.
Which, Bezos was actually a student of Gerard O'Neill. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, he actually has a direct connection back to him.
Wow.
And I've always found that idea pretty amazing, this idea of artificial gravity and what could you do with an O'Neill cylinder. It seems to me that that's a much easier way to, or not easier, but a much more viable way of doing this. Rather than colonizing another planet, maybe we should colonize space itself. What do you think?
Well, yeah, anyone who's watched my channel knows that's where I stand. I think that the moon and Mars are fascinating places to explore, for us to send some kind of research station where people go for whatever is the amount of time that is healthy and safe to explore and learn to live on another world. But for really the long-term viability of humanity in space, it's going to be that orbital colony direction. And Jeff Bezos sort of came out in that camp in May of this year, 2019, and he presented these beautiful imagery and animations of these gigantic space stations that he would like to build in space. And I think the fundamental argument that he's making, and it's one that really does resonate with me, is we are churning up the environment of Earth faster than the Earth can handle it. We are filling the atmosphere with pollution. We are dumping plastic into the oceans. We are using every energy source we can get our hands on because we're human beings. And either we run against this brick wall where we have exploited the resources of planet Earth as best we can, and now we just have to face the decline and rationing that will happen, or we move out into the solar system itself and we start to use all of these resources that no one cares about, and that there is no environment to pollute apart from space junk in low Earth orbit. You dismantle an asteroid, it's a rock. So that we should, Jeff Bezos really feels like we should be shifting our utilization of resources from planet Earth out into space. Let's generate our power in space. Let's grab our raw resources from asteroids. Let's manufacture things in space. Let's toss the waste out into the universe. Who cares, right? It's a big universe. No one will ever see it. And that is the way that humanity can continue enjoying a high standard of living. And that if we don't make that transition to space, then really it's just a matter of time before we are forced by the laws of physics to downgrade our existence to what the planet can handle. And I don't think anyone wants to live that way. And so the Earth is the best place in the universe for life. So let's let it do that. Let's let it be the best place for life. And so Bezos has really doubled down on this idea of O'Neill cylinders, and so he did this big presentation, and some people got it, and a lot of people were really derisive about it. Like, we need to deal with the problems here on Earth before the millionaires and the billionaires head off to space and live in their Elysium space colonies. But I think the worry, the existential worry that Jeff Bezos has, and I definitely share it. It's that same conversation that we had at the beginning of this episode, right? It's just like everybody wants a better standard of living. And if they all do, what then? Who gets to decide that they don't? Who gets to decide? And so instead, let's just punt that problem down. Let's go to space. Let's grind up asteroids. Let's use the power from the sun. Let's manufacture things in space. And let's not worry about polluting the environment of Earth. So I'm a huge fan of that plan because I don't like the alternative. The alternative is we run out of the resources on Earth and we make this beautiful planet nasty.
Well, and I mean, the most poetic thing about Bezos' vision, which he had like an Elon Musk moment there where he laid all that out. I was like, I've never seen this guy talk this way.
Yeah, I know.
And I think the most poetic thing is that Earth becomes a nature preserve, and that everything, manufacturing, everything moves off into space, and the planet just becomes its natural crucible of life, And
it's weird to see the arguments against it. Like, who doesn't want Earth to be a nature preserve?
I think it'd be beautiful, and especially if the O'Neills, because if you think about an O'Neill cylinder, you could probably make that much nicer to live on, in principle, than living on Earth, because you don't have hurricanes, you don't have earthquakes, you don't have any of that, and you don't have things like crop failures, because
I'm Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% convinced that we'll want to, like, I wouldn't want to live in space. I mean, I want to be able to walk out into forests and go to oceans, and I want to be able to travel the world, and I want to be able to do these things. But I like the idea of not having an environmental impact of that. That all of the things, all of the garbage that we create, all of the manufacturing that we do, all of the power that we require, all of the dinosaurs that we burn up in our cars, none of that has to happen. Because we're doing all of the manufacturing and resource acquisition out in space. And we get to instead enjoy living on a planet that is as close to nature as humanly possible.
Well, and the other thing too is, you have the full energy of the sun out there which to run your O'Neill cylinders. So you don't really have to, you have a different, it's a game changer. You don't have the same sort of fuel and energy requirements that you have to, manufacture things down here. And there's always the possibility that you can manufacture stuff better in zero gravity than anything else.
But I did the math, right? You would need 45,000 Starship launches to build an O'Neill cylinder. So that's not realistic. The only way to do this is with space-based manufacturing and acquisition of resources. So the next big step, right, is we've got to learn how to gather material from space, be it energy, water, and rock. And we need to be able to assemble and manufacture things in space. And those are the two key technologies that need to come next. When those are clearly starting to roll, that's when we're going to know that we're off to the races with all of the other stuff that everybody wants. The colonies on other planets, the O'Neill cylinders, the exploration of the solar system at a serious scale, and even attempts at going out to other star systems. It's got to be resource acquisition and manufacturing in space.
And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but we have to take a break. I'm joined today by Fraser Cain, publisher of Universe Today and prominent YouTuber. Check out his stuff.
Well, I hope you're enjoying this interview with me. And I want to take a second to let you know about all the other cool stuff that I'm doing. Of course, you can follow my YouTube channel here, right on YouTube. I'm the publisher of Universe Today and have been so for 20 years. So if you want to get space news every day, come join us at universetoday.com. But I think the best thing, if you want to get regular space news on a weekly basis, get all the information that you need to know, get my weekly email newsletter. It's ad-free, shows up in your inbox once a week. Go to universetoday.com/newsletter to sign up. Totally free.
And we're back with Fraser Cain. So Fraser, new exoplanet with water detected in the atmosphere. Tell us about that.
Yeah, good timing to have this interview. One of the biggest stories of the year just broke today. So, in fact, my video is written. We haven't even published it. So you're going to get the sneak preview of what we're working on. But yeah, so astronomers from everywhere announced today that they have found water vapor in the atmosphere of a planet orbiting another star in the habitable zone. So just to kind of break this up into all the different pieces. So the planet is called K2-18b, and it is one of the planets that was discovered by the Kepler Space Telescope, and it was actually found back in 2015. It was done using the transit method, where the planet passes in front of the star and it dims the light of the star, and so they're able to detect that the planet exists. It was found to be orbiting this red dwarf star every 33 days. And then another team of astronomers were able to do these follow-up observations with the radial velocity method, and they were able to get at the mass of the planet, and they were able to find that it has a mass of 8 times the mass of the Earth. So it's about double the size of the Earth and about 8 times the mass of the Earth. And when you take those two things together, you get a density that is less than the Earth. And so the thinking was, okay, well, maybe it's got like some big, puffy, gassy atmosphere, or maybe it has a lot of water in it with some kind of rocky core. And it happens to orbit within the habitable zone of this red dwarf star. It takes only 33 days, but red dwarf stars give off less light. And so The average surface temperature of this planet is about 10 degrees centigrade. And just for comparison, Earth's average temperature is 14 degrees centigrade. And then with global warming, 15, let's try to keep it under 15.5 if we can, please. So, right. And so then the Hubble Space Telescope had been doing observations of this planet during 2016 and 2017. And so astronomers took this data that had been gathered by Hubble, watching as these transits happened, and they were able to use these new algorithms to tease out that there was water vapor in the atmosphere of this planet. And so for the first time in the history of exoplanetary research, astronomers have detected water vapor in the atmosphere of a planet that is orbiting within the habitable zone of another star. And this is big news, because we've suspected that there's water there, liquid water could be there in one of these habitable zones, and now suddenly water has been found.
Now, there are implications to this. I literally just heard about this story, and I'm thinking about it. And okay, so red dwarfs, one of the concerns of those regarding habitability is that they tend to bathe their planets in ultraviolet light.
Yeah.
Ultraviolet light should destroy water vapor, right?
Yeah.
So where is this coming from? Is there an ocean there?
Good question. Right. So one idea, because the density of this planet is so low, it could be a water world. And not just like water world in the Kevin Costner sense of the word, but like water world in the floating blob of water going around a planet, right? And so you're detecting water vapor in the atmosphere because it's constantly bathed in radiation, and the water is getting blasted off the planet and out into space, and that's being detected. But so there could be water there. And you're exactly right. The thinking with these red dwarf stars is they're a lot more temperamental than stars like our sun. They're capable of blasting out flares that are tens, hundreds of times more powerful than anything the sun ever produces, and would strip the surface of a planet of all life, would blast away the atmosphere. But if you have something that has a lot of water, then you go down a few tens of meters and you're very well protected from this radiation. So it might end up being that, in fact, a planet like this could be a perfect place for life. The other thing is that, of course, these planets tend to be tidally locked to their star. And so one side of the planet could be boiling hot and the other side of the planet could be freezing cold. But maybe you get this really nice circulation that carries the temperatures around from the front to the back. So with various convecting currents. So it's a fascinating discovery. It's going to be one of the first places that things like James Webb and these other monster telescopes that are coming online later on in the 2020s will be pointing at. I mean, this is going to be one of the most exciting targets to look at for the coming years.
This is actually kind of exciting, because for the longest time there, it seemed like red dwarfs were just dropping off of the list as being,
Yeah.
being anything that could be habitable where life could arise. But now, did you read that paper a few weeks ago about biofluorescence, where the scientists had determined that certain Earth life, corals, can actually deal with ultraviolet simply by re-radiating it as visible light?
Oh, interesting.
They make the case that, well, maybe an exoplanet, if life arises on it, maybe it can handle ultraviolet just simply by reflecting it off and changing its frequency.
Yeah.
So
life can find a way.
Life tends to, and it's kind of nice because now red dwarfs are sort of coming back on the table.
Yeah.
As being habitable. Unfortunately, the ones that I really want to know about are the orange dwarfs, the type K, I think, because those things, your habitable zone's a little bit further out.
Yep.
And it would seem that might actually be better for life than even our solar system is. And unfortunately, they're also the hardest stars to study for exoplanets in their habitable zones just because of their type. Yeah.
These planets are being found around these red dwarf stars because the stars are so small. And so when a planet passes in front, it's a very significant event. And same thing with the radial velocity. The planet can really yank its star around and have a very significant effect on the light. The most interesting planets, to us, right, are going to be those sun-like stars. They're more massive. The planets have less of an effect on them. and the planet's going to be out, the habitable zone is going to be much farther out, where the planet may take, say, a year to go around. So you make an observation, 1 year later you make a second observation, and you think you might have found a planet, and then other people are going to then take multiple years to do confirmation. So it's all going to unfold in slow motion. These little worlds that are zipping around their stars right now, they're going to be the easy ones to find. It's going to be the other Earths are going to take a while.
Now, we could go in the other direction, too. The main argument against Type F stars not being very habitable is the ultraviolet light, because they just produce a lot of it. But if life can get past that, then Type F comes on the table. Now, those are shorter-lived stars, but they still live for billions of years.
Yeah.
And they have a further out habitable zone than our own sun does. So now those are on the table with this new thinking about ultraviolet. It's pretty amazing, really.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for joining us today, Fraser.
Happy to be here anytime.
So where will we be in 10 years? Will we have a colony on Mars? Will Starship be used to send people and goods quickly around the globe? The trend is good for Elon and his company SpaceX, and it's quite a unique time in history to be able to watch this modern space race take place. While Elon wants to be on Mars, Blue Origin looks to the moon and O'Neill cylinders, and NASA is looking further out with plans like the Titan copter. No matter what, this is going to be fun.
John, would you ever live in an O'Neill cylinder?
What? Yes, of course I would. Well, as long as it didn't leak, and the rocket was safe, and the food was decent.
What do you mean by decent?
Salami, and cans of cheese and crackers, and cocktail sausages. You know, the finer things.
Oh dear, I see we're about to have the finer things discussion again.
Only the best on my cylinder.
Would that be Cylinder 8?
What? You leave that song out of this. And on that note, joining me next week, we'll have one of several interviews covering the flurry of science news stories that have been coming at me like a fleet of supercharged LeBarons. See you then.